Hey, while you're settling back in, I want to show you a picture of my parents. And believe it or not, I have parents, and this is a picture of us. So my dad is in the center there. That is not Malachi in your lower left-hand corner. That is me when I was a little bit younger than him.
You're a liar.
My sister is there in the middle front. Her name's Nicoya. She lives up in Missouri. And then my mom is on the left. It's a little fuzzy because my mom, she's 70 now, but she still insists on doing Throwback Thursdays. And so she will get her camera out, and then she'll just walk up to her wall where all the family pictures are, and then she'll take a picture of one of them. The first time she ever did a Throwback Thursday, she accidentally did a video. So on Facebook, it was hashtag TBT, which I'm not sure how she learned that, but then it was like a 6-second video of her shaky hand on a picture. It's fantastic. But this is my family. Those are my parents. My dad, Jim, he is 6'5". Back then, he was really skinny. When my mom and dad first met, my dad wore a 28-38 pants, which means he was like 8 feet tall and weighed 50 pounds. And then that's my mom. Her name's Kathy. They've been married for 30-ish years, something like that. So, yeah, they're fantastic. They're fantastic. Wonderful, wonderful people. I love them a lot. And I wanted to show them to you because over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about family. And in particular, as Aaron mentioned, we're going to talk about how to train your parents. So here's the deal. Listen up. You guys are all teenagers, right? Yeah. And when you're a teenager, the whole parenting thing gets a little tricky. Trent, you okay? You cool? You cool? As Nathan would say, there are decaffeinated versions that are just as tasty. So chill out. As a teenager, the whole parenting scene kind of changes, okay? You're not itty-bitty anymore. You're old enough to reason. You're old enough to think. You're old enough to interact with your parents differently. And it can be a really hard time. When Aaron asked you how many of you wished you were trusted more, a lot of you raise your hand because you're in this weird period where you're not quite a little kid anymore, okay? There are parts of you that feel very mature and grown up, but your parents still look at you like my parents look at me in that picture as a little kid that really needs them. And so this whole idea of trust when you're a teenager is huge. You're getting jobs, you're getting car keys, you're arguing about curfew, you're wondering about independence, dating comes up, and some of you feel like your parents don't trust you enough. But here's the thing. Here's the truth about trust, and I want you to listen to this really carefully. Trust is built or destroyed with every single decision that you make. With your parents, trust is built or destroyed with every decision, good or bad. You either earn trust or you lose trust. And here's the other thing about trust. Trust takes a long, long time to earn, and it takes an instant to lose everything you've earned, okay? I wanted to demonstrate that a little bit for you so you could see what I'm talking about here. Think about your life and how day in and day out you are either earning or losing trust. Let's talk about earning trust first, okay? Let's say that you and some friends are out to a movie, all right? You go out to a movie. The movie runs a little longer than you planned. You get out of the movie, it's just a couple minutes before curfew, and you know you still got to drop a couple people off and make your way home. And so you decide, being a mature young person, hey, I'm going to let my parents know. So I'm going to call them, and I'm going to tell them that the movie went a little long and that, you know, we're running a little late. I've got to drop my friends off, but then I'll be home as soon as possible. And as you do that, what you may not realize you're doing is that you are actually earning some trust, all right? Or let's take another for instance, all right? Let's say, for example, that you finish eating dinner, and so you go home, or excuse me, you're at home, you're eating dinner, and you're done with dinner, and you say, hey, you know what, Mom, Dad, I'm going to go upstairs. I've got a lot of homework to do. I've got a big test coming up. I want to give it the time that it needs for me to do well. And so you walk over to the trash can and you scrape your plate and you put your dish in the dishwasher and you go up to your room and you close your door and you don't jump on YouTube for 5 hours. You actually do your homework. And then you bring home good grades, and your parents realize, hey, they're serious about this. They want to do well in school. They want to be the kind of person that I'm raising them up to be. Okay, so you're earning trust all that time. Or let's say, for example, you ask to borrow the car. And so you go out on the weekend and you borrow the car, but when you are done with the car, you don't leave it a mess. You don't leave your Taco Bell bag in the back seat. You don't let your friends leave all their junk all over the place. You don't leave the gas tank on empty. You actually go put a little gas in it. Maybe you run it through the car wash. Maybe you get it detailed. Maybe you actually return the keys where you got them from, and then you let your parents know, hey, thanks for letting me use the car. And in doing that, what you're doing is you are gaining trust, all right? Now, I know that sounds like pretty crazy, but that is possible. All those things are possible. But sometimes the opposite happens, right? And we start losing trust. It starts evaporating a little bit. Let's say you are running a little late from the movie, but you don't want to be the lame kid in the group and have to get on the phone with your mommy to tell her that you're running a little late. And so instead of calling, you reason with yourself, hey, they're probably asleep anyway, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do my thing, and everybody wants to go to Steak and Shake and get something to eat before we head home, so I'm not going to bug them, I'm not going to call, and I don't want to interrupt their night's sleep, and so I'm not going to do anything. And so you sneak in the house at 2 in the morning, and your dad's sitting on the recliner waiting for you. And when you do something like that, what you don't realize you're doing is you're really losing trust. And what you're doing in your relationship is you're creating a situation where the relationship that you have with your parents is just getting peeled back little by little until finally you realize you've lost some trust. And that trust continues to go away, right? Little by little, it's going away with every single decision that you make. Let's say, for example, that dinner is over and you say, Mom, Dad, I really want to get a good grade on this test, so I'm going to go up to my room. I need to study for a couple of hours. And so you go up to your room and, for like 10 minutes you study, but then you start texting with all your friends, and they say, have you seen this YouTube video? So you get on YouTube, and then you're on YouTube for like 3 hours, and then you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. I'm going to go check out some more videos. And then before you know it, it's 1 in the morning. Your parents are knocking on the door asking if you've got your homework done. You don't have any of your homework done. And then they see that you've been online, so they check your history, and then they realize that you've been looking at a lot of stuff you shouldn't have been looking at. And as you do that kind of stuff, you're losing trust. Or let's say, for example, that you borrow the car, right? You go out, and instead of, bringing the car back full of gas, and instead of bringing the car back clean, your parents or your friends left their junk all over your parents' car, and now what are you going to do? Because it's all a mess, but you got home late anyway, and so no car washes were open, and so the dirty car is sitting in the driveway, and you leave the keys in your pants because it was too late to return them to your parents because they were already in bed, and you broke curfew again. And they wake up in the morning and they got a dirty car, and they don't know where you were that whole time, and they're not sure what went on the night before. The whole time you're doing that, you're losing more and more and more trust, right? Every decision you make is a decision where you either earn or lose trust. And over the course of your teenage years, it is super easy for you in just a few decisions to lose all the trust you ever gained with your parents. And so a lot of times we raise our hands and we say we wish our parents trusted us more. But if you think back on your life, the reality is you've made a number of decisions that have trained them not to. So what I want to do with the rest of our time is talk about the ways that you can train your parents not to not trust you, which is what some of us have done, but how can you train them to trust you? But I'm going to need your help because we're going to look up some scriptures. I need someone to stand up and read Proverbs 28:26. Chapter 28, verse 26. As you're looking that up, here's the first way you can train your parents to trust you. If you don't want to lose trust, but you want to gain trust, I want to tell you the way you can do that. Here's the first way. Don't listen to yourself all the time. Right? Don't listen to yourself all the time. Remember those scenarios where you're coming out of the movie and you're thinking, man, I wonder what the right move is here? Sometimes you can come up with a good idea, like calling home. But sometimes there's that voice in your head and you know it's the wrong choice, but you hear that voice in your head, oh, don't bother them, they're sleeping. And if you want to train your parents to trust you, then don't listen to yourself all the time. Who's got that verse? Go ahead, Tessa, stand up and read it.
26?
Yeah, just verse 26.
Those who trust their own insight are foolish, but anyone who walks in wisdom is safe.
Okay, those who trust their own insight are foolish. But it's when we listen to wise people in our lives where we can build trust with our parents. So if you want to train your parents to trust you, if you want your parents to really believe in you and trust you and not always nag at you or second guess you or think little of you, the way you shore that up is by not always listening to yourself. Now, there's a second thing you can do. In addition to not just listening to yourself all the time, the second thing you can do to train your parents to trust you is don't assume, this is a huge one, that your parents are idiots, okay? I have been a teenager, all right? I remember thinking that my parents were completely clueless, that they had no idea what it was really like, that they had no idea what it was like to be a teenager at my school, in my life, on my team, at my job, with that girl, with that friend. I was convinced they had no clue. But if you want to train your parents to trust you, then one of the things that you need to do is don't assume that your parents are idiots. If you're still in the book of Proverbs, turn to chapter 7, all right? And when you get to chapter 7, if somebody wouldn't mind, stand up and read verses 1 through 3. Proverbs 7, verse 1 through 3. Cameron, go right ahead. Read it nice and loud.
My son, keep my words and store my commands within you. Keep my commands and you will live. Guard my teachings as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart.
Awesome. Thank you. How many of you know who wrote Proverbs? Who? Solomon, okay? Who's he writing to? His son, right? If you read through Proverbs, he is using direct address to his offspring over and over and over again. Now, most of you, I bet a lot of you know that Solomon is known as one of the wisest men to have ever lived. He wasn't perfect, but he had a lot of wisdom. And the book of Proverbs is chock full of that wisdom, right? And in the verses that Cameron just read, what Solomon is doing is he's encouraging his son to listen to what he says. Why? Because even though Solomon doesn't say it, he kind of knows what he's talking about. He has some wisdom to offer. You know, my dad, I showed you a picture of him. My dad dropped out of high school. He went back later and got his GED, but for many years, he just did his thing, right? Harleys and whatever. He just did his thing. And there are a lot of people, when my dad was 16, who wished he would listen to what they said, all right? And my dad lived a really complicated life, but by the time I came along, my dad had a ton of wisdom to offer, some of which he learned the hard way, a lot of which he got from the scriptures, some of which he passed down from his dad and the dad before, so he had a lot of wisdom to offer. And if I could rank like the top 5 things my dad ever said to me, like a couple of them would be, pay attention and listen to me, son. Like if I could accumulate all the things he ever said, those would probably be the top 2. Because he had so much wisdom to offer, the problem was I was so wrapped up in myself most of the time that I wasn't paying any attention. And what all of your parents want, I really believe this, even the parents that aren't very good parents, and those exist, okay? But they're probably not yours. Even the parents that aren't awesome at parenting really want what's best for their kids. I really believe that. They really don't want their kids to repeat the same mistakes they made. They want their kids to be a little better off than they were. And with Christian parents, they really want their kids to follow after Jesus. And they don't want their kids to repeat the same mistakes that they made. So the biggest way that you can train your parents to trust you is to not always think that they're idiots, because they're not. They're really not. They really have a lot of wisdom to offer. All right, here's number 3. And turn to the book of Ephesians while I'm telling you this. Number 3 is obey your parents. If you want your parents to trust you, then obey them. Now, I know that sounds like the worst thing ever, but there is no faster way to get your parents to trust you than to obey and do what they say. There's no other way. That's the best way. It really is. If your parents tell you, I need you home by 11, and you come home at 10:55, they're going to trust you more. If you come home at 11:55, they're going to trust you less. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Like, it's that way with your friends, right? If your friend tells you they're going to do something and then they don't do it, like, they lose some credibility with you, right? You're like, why'd you do that to me? It works the same in all our relationships, right? So if you say you're going to do something, or if your parents tell you to do something, the quickest way you can train them to trust you is to do what they say. And not to argue, and not to whine, and not to have your whole life be filled with drama, and not to try to buck the system or cheat the system or find a loophole. You guys are smart enough to do that. Don't do that. And don't make excuses, even if they sound noble in your mind. I think I've told this story before, but most of you probably don't remember it or weren't here when I told it. So the spring of my freshman year of high school, I went to a little country school, and then we all went into town for high school, and it was just kind of like this weird thing for us country kids to be in town with the town kids, and there were these popularity things going on, and like I was kind of cool for a country kid, but like I wasn't like super cool city kid kind of thing. I know it's weird, but it existed. And but the spring of my freshman year, I got invited to a party at the coolest freshman girl's house. The coolest. Her name was Cherie. If you're watching online, Cherie, great party. So here's what happened. We were supposed to go before the dance for pictures. There was a dance. I didn't say that part. We were supposed to go before the dance for pictures, and then the party was after the dance, okay? My parents didn't get home in time to take me to her house for pictures beforehand. I was so angry. So I roll into the dance late, and I'm just kind of ticked at my parents, which didn't happen very often, but it was. And then there's the party after, which they kind of felt bad for being late, so they're like, yeah, you can go to the party, but we don't want you to go anywhere except for her house. So we're at her house, we're hanging out, nothing freaky going on. We were all good kids, we were just having fun, whatever. But then the idea came to go to this haunted church, which was out in the country, right? And it was like, well, I want to go to the haunted church because everyone is going to the haunted church. Oh, my parents told me not to go anywhere but here. I should call them and have them come get me. But then I wouldn't be at the haunted church. Plus, they didn't get me here for pictures, so I kind of just, I just made this whole thing. So we went to the haunted church. It wasn't haunted because that's stupid. Like, people were there going, ooh, or whatever. It's stupid. And then on the way back from the haunted church, we drop a couple kids off at their house. Then we get back to her house, and my parents are waiting. And I get in the car, and my dad's like, where were you? You saw how big he was. It was even deeper than that. Like, that was a falsetto-sounding voice compared to his actual voice. He asked me where I was. Quick thinking, right? Well, we had to take a couple of kids home, and so I rode along to take them home, which is technically still against the rule, but more permissible perhaps than we all went to a haunted church and I didn't care what you said because I was mad at you, so I disobeyed, right? Now, I remember telling my parents that story later, and they were like kind of disappointed because there's nothing you can do to make your parents trust you less than just blatantly disobey them. But there's nothing you can do that would make them trust you more than just to do what they ask you to do and do it without complaining. Do it without arguing, all right? The last way you can train your parents to trust you is tell the truth all the time. We didn't read Ephesians. Go to Ephesians chapter 6. Did you stay at Ephesians? Yes. Excellent. Ephesians chapter 6, just verses 1 and 2. This is really basic, but get it. Go, Chris.
Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise.
All right. Obey your parents. It's the right thing to do. God says so. And you'll be training them to trust you. You'll be training them to trust you if you obey them. All right, the last thing, tell the truth all the time. Somebody look up Proverbs chapter 20. Proverbs chapter 20, and when you get there, somebody read verse 17, please. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 17. Tell the truth all the time. Who's got it?
I got it.
2 in a row. Go, Chris, go.
Stolen bread tastes sweet, but it turns to gravel in the mouth.
Okay, that's a different translation. But here's the idea. What does it say on the screen? Bread gained by deceit is sweet, which is stealing. Bread gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but afterward his mouth will be full of gravel. Okay, have you ever told a lie? Have you ever been filled with deceit, and at the point of the lie, it felt pretty good? Like you kind of got away with something. But then as the lie was discovered, as the consequences of the lie played themselves out, you were like, oh, this doesn't taste so good. Like lies have a way of doing that. Deceit has a way of doing that. It can be sweet in our mouths at first, but as the consequences of that lie and that deceit play out, oh, we're kind of tasting on something that we shouldn't have in our mouth. Like this tastes like gravel. When you tell your parents the truth, you train them to trust you, even if it's hard. I tell my kids this all the time. Just tell the truth the first time. Because the more you lie, the more I'm not going to believe what you say. And if you'll tell me the truth, there might still be a consequence for what you did that you're telling me the truth about. But there's not going to be another consequence for lying to me in my face. Right? So just rip the Band-Aid off and tell the truth. Always tell the truth. Always tell the truth, even when it's hard to tell the truth. I've sat with teenagers while they told their parents the truth about something that's awful. Like, they're going to disown me if I tell them this. Awful. And I've seen the tears, and I've seen parents get up and leave the room, and it's awful. It's awful. But what's worse is letting lies stack up after lie, after lie, after lie, and then having to go back and undo all that harm. Guys, it's no good. It's no good. If you want to train your parents to trust you, don't listen to yourself all the time. Don't assume your parents are idiots. Obey your parents. Tell the truth all the time. If you do those 4 things, consistently in your life, your parents will trust you. They will trust you. I guarantee it. They will trust you. If you want to train your parents to trust you, the bottom line is this. You have to be a trustworthy person. You have to be a trustworthy person. And guys, the only way you can do that is to be like Jesus. You know, people accused Jesus of a lot of things. They accused Jesus of a lot of things. But he never got accused of being untrustworthy. Like he always did what he said he was going to do. He was always helpful. He was trustworthy. He is the perfect example of a trustworthy person. And if you want to train your parents to trust you, you have to be a trustworthy person. And if you want to be a trustworthy person, then you need to be like Jesus. Remember my family? I want to tell you about how my faith changed my family. My parents both really lived far from Christ for certain years of their life. But by God's grace, they always saw to it that I went to church. My sister and I, they always made sure we went to church from that age on. I've got pictures of myself going to church in that shirt. Like a little Baptist church, neighbors took us. They would drop us off and pick us up. My parents didn't go. They were suspicious. They were a little leery. But they made sure we went. As I was discipled growing up, I'm a kid. I'm 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. I'd bring home Sunday school lessons. I would whatever. My dad will tell you to this day, if he were here today, he would tell you that watching the church interact with me and watching how I grew in my faith and how my sister grew in her faith really impacted him a lot. In fact, it got to the point where I made the decision that I wanted to be baptized. So I brought home all my baptism stuff to study, and I read through it, and I left it laying around the house, and my dad would pick it up and study it. So much so that he made the decision that he needed to come back to the Lord, and he needed to be baptized as well. And so on March 6, 1994, my dad, me, my sister, we were all baptized the same night. A few years later, as my dad talked to my mother about what he had discovered in the scriptures, she started reading the Bible for herself. She came to know the Lord as well. And what my parents would tell you is that my sister and I were pretty good kids, and that watching us grow in our faith actually helped them get closer to Jesus. So you may be sitting here and you may be thinking, yo, Titus, I get it. I need to be trustworthy. But my parents aren't as strong in their belief as you may think. Like, they're not the same way at home as they are at church. Big deal. Forget all that, right? You be like Jesus. You be trustworthy. You don't use your parents' weaknesses as an excuse to not be trustworthy. You don't let resentment build up in your heart towards your parents so that you feel like you deserve more independence than they allow. But instead, train them to trust you by letting Jesus lead your life. You follow Jesus, let Jesus lead your life. You trust Jesus, and your parents will trust you because of the way you live. Now here's the deal. I don't know how all that settles in your heart tonight, but anytime I talk to teenagers about their parents, usually it opens up some wounds, all right? So what we want to do tonight is create some space for you to be alone with God in prayer, or for you to think through some things that maybe you need to say to your parents, maybe even when you get home. And so as we just create some time here, we're not in a huge hurry for some worship. We've got some pens and paper in the back. And what I'd love for you to do is sing with all your heart. This is a song about trusting Jesus, about going to places that are hard. And this may be hard for some of you to think about your relationship with your parents. But you can spread out and you can pray. You can ask God to help you restore some trust with your parents, to help you be the person you need to be so they can trust in you more. With the pen and the paper, maybe you need to write a note to your parents. And look, guys, maybe it's a note you never give them, but it's just some stuff you need to say, and you need to get out on paper. Take the time and do that. Or maybe it is some stuff you know you need to say, and so you need to write these notes, and you need to give them to them tonight, tomorrow, and say, I want to be a more trustworthy person. I want you to be able to trust me. Here are the commitments I'm making. Will you help me with this? So this is a time of worship. It's a time of prayer. It's a time for you to let the Holy Spirit lead you to be more trusting of Jesus so that people can be more trusting of you. So even as we're singing and worshiping, feel free to get up, write those notes, pray, spread out around the room, do whatever you have to do. But let's do that together now. Would you stand?